Welcome to Telegeography Explains the Internet, the show that explores the business behind all of the ways humans stay connected around the world. I'm your host, Greg Bryan, and my guest today is Ross Flynn, who is project manager at the Mobile Ecosystem Forum. As we've gone through a couple of times on the show, there are two MEFs out there, the organization formerly known as the Metro Ethernet Forum and the Mobile Ecosystem Forum. So I'm going to say MEF in the intro here and sometimes in the show, and that's the MEF that I mean in this case. But back to our guest. Ross is a bit of an unusual guest for the show, but when I came across his work at the MEF, I thought it could be really useful to think about from the telecom perspective on this show. So Ross comes from the advertising industry, where he worked with programmatic advertising, which I will leave it to him to properly define in the interview in a couple of moments. And he eventually ended up at the Mobile Ecosystem Forum to work with these advertising issues on the mobile carrier side. So Ross really helped me, and by extension, I hope you, the listener, understand how ads are targeted to consumers in the smart device era and how that might impact and benefit service providers, hence the work that he is doing at MEF, working on these with mobile carriers. So I really found this interview informative, both per my usual role as a telecom analyst, but also as a media consumer, to really better understand how modern targeted advertising is actually working behind the scenes. So I think you will enjoy. Welcome to the show, Ross.
Hey, how's it going, man? How are you?
I'm doing all right. Yeah, thanks so much for joining me. This is a little bit of a different show for me in the sense that usually I know at least like enough to make me dangerous about a topic. This is one where I really know nothing at all. But when we were doing our sort of like intro call for this, I thought it was really interesting stuff. So I'm really excited to hear what's going on. But first, Ross, I always ask guests to just kind of give a brief background on themselves and you know how you got to be program manager at MEF.
Yeah, sure. Sounds good. So I'm Irish, if you couldn't tell already. So that's fine that I'm going to have to talk a lot because we like to talk a lot. So that's good. So originally out of college, I was working for something, I guess you'd call it a sort of an ad vendor, ad agency. It was kind of a little bit ambiguous as to what we were. But essentially, we had access to smart TV data. From some of the directly from some of the OEMs. So we had like LG and Vizio. The company was Irish, run by a very nice man called Ronan. Shout outs to him. But we mostly worked in the US, and we got the TV data directly from these companies in the US. And essentially, it was a pretty cool product. So in every smart TV in the US, there's a little chip called ACR, or automated content recognition. And originally that chip actually had I think it came from like Shazam. Like that was the technology that they used to make it, was sort of recognizing an audio, you know, like a snippet and matching it to a song. But then they added sort of the visual element to it and basically put it in smart TVs as a way of recognizing what people are watching. So we use that data to sort of inform our digital ad buying engine. Right. So like there's a lot of cool use cases. So like the way it would work is, let's say we're doing an ad or we're doing a campaign for Coca-Cola. They would send us a snippet of their upcoming commercial, and then we could see we'd sort of ingest that in our system. And then we could see who actually watched that on any TV channel or anything. So you could kind of think of some nifty uses for it. And essentially, anyway, once we recognized, okay, this IP address, it was sort of like at an IP level. Right. The smart TV was basically like, just think of it as like a mobile device connected to an IP, and then we had a sort of a cross-device graph, it's called, which basically we can see the other devices connected to that modem. So then we can say, okay, this person saw a Coke ad, let's send them Coke ads on their phone, on their tablet.
So
or
that
even
explains
on
it, everybody who's experienced this. This is one part of that formula, right? Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
we're watching.
Yeah.
But yeah, so and it was really cool because there's a million uses because it was literally anything that we ingested we would recognize on the screen. So one of my favorite jobs back in that job was I used to we worked with some video game companies for
Mhm.
their ad campaigns, and basically we could tell the video game companies who's playing their games,
Right.
but it's still the same basic thing where we have to fingerprint a clip. So
Right.
it's more difficult in a video game because if you
Right.
think of
Because
an
you have to pick a segment that everybody plays, essentially, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
That's the thing about video games is that anyone can go to different levels. I mean, there's a million different angles
Right.
you can look at one level in. So we would look for like kind of a universal clip, like like a cutscene. I don't
Hmm.
know if you're a gamer or not,
Hmm. Hmm.
but sometimes they play like a little movie or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
And that's what we're looking for.
Right.
So we literally have to go in on the PlayStation. We had like a PlayStation and play these
And the
games and
cutscenes.
fingerprint
Yeah.
them. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was really hard work.
Yeah, that's really funny. As an analyst, I have to wonder, why did the OEM uh, uh, companies give these data to you? What's their
That's a
incentive
great
thing?
question.
Yeah.
That's a great question. So they got some kickback from us. So
Of
we
course.
went
Yeah.
directly to the agencies. So we mostly worked with entertainment clients
Hmm.
because there's sort of an obvious. We can obviously prove out the value of our ad campaign because not only can we see who watched your show before the campaign, but we can also see who tuned in directly because of our campaign, which is
Right.
pretty neat. But so anyway, the nature of it was, so they were represented by the agencies, the ad agency. So and then we worked directly with the agencies as well by being a vendor of this data basically. And it was sort of like what's called a managed service campaign. So
Hmm.
we'll get into that later, I guess, when we talk about programmatic advertising. But
Right.
essentially, it was sort of white glove. We handled everything, and obviously, we get more of a margin based on that. And then, based on what we sell, the amount we sell, we kick a certain percentage of that to the OEMs.
Right.
Um, but one of the challenges of that, and one of the challenges in sort of the programmatic advertising industry in general, is that data is getting more and more hard to come by,
Hmm.
whether by privacy concerns,
Right.
or the sort of deprecation of the third party cookie, which we'll talk about later.
Hmm. Hmm.
But anyway, basically the OEM started to basically realize the value of the data they had.
Right.
So more and more of them were taking it in house, and they had their own ad guys as well selling the exact same stuff. So they're like, let's just keep it all in house.
Gotcha.
So yeah, yeah.
So then, how did that bring you to the mobile ecosystem forum?
So yeah, I met James Williams, my current boss, and yeah, so essentially, the Mobile Ecosystem Forum, in case anyone doesn't know, we're a global not-for-profit trade body. We've been around for 20 plus years, started by a fellow called Andrew Budd, who's
Hmm.
our chairman. And essentially, we're a not-for-profit trade body that sort of champions our brands. We're sort of like a marketing, we're sort of like an extension of our brand's marketing arms, you know what I mean? And we also act as sort of a neutral platform for telcos and operators and all that to have a neutral discussion. We have like online working groups or events in which people can talk on panels and all that good stuff. So anyway, I met the James, my current boss there, and they are kind of at the moment a lot of our members are messaging companies. So about
Hmm.
2/3 of members of MEF are messaging, and they're trying to, I guess, kind of bring the advertising guys in, the MVAS guys in, So I could have came over to help those guys come in and also, be a moderator for these guys, be
Hmm.
a sort of someone they can talk to essentially.
Right.
Um, but originally, actually, we were the Mobile Entertainment Forum, and
Okay.
we're
That ties it together with this topic a little bit, I think. That's interesting.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it originally we were focused on ringtones and callback tones. Crazy Frog was I don't know if you had Crazy Frog, but that was a big sort of that sort of started it all. So
Hmm.
I guess we're trying to make it more like the Mobile Entertainment Forum now, I
Interesting.
guess.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I should say, listeners of the show, I did an episode with Dario Betti, who's the CEO of MEF, Oh, a while ago. Explained all the other kind of things that the group is working on. So if you want a deeper background, then you can go check out that episode. But we're focused here on programmatic advertising.
Yeah.
So Ross, this was a new term for me when I ran into your stuff, and I thought that's always a great place to start. Just what is programmatic advertising?
Yeah, and I assume a lot of your listeners maybe probably aren't familiar with the
Yeah,
term as well,
yeah,
right?
absolutely. So our listeners are from mostly, the networks kind of telco world. So again, this intersects what we're doing, but is not something they're thinking about day to day for sure.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, I'm primarily from that world, but I've been in MEF now for over a year, so I think I can kind of explain it for the telco
Yeah,
oriented in mind. But essentially, what it is sort of like the digital advertising strategy. It's sort of like a number of things in working in unison, but it's essentially the way digital advertising works today. It's sort of an automated buying of advertising space and placing of ads through software and algorithms.
mm,
It's algorithmically driven, but it offers a lot of control. In terms of what you're doing in real time. So essentially, the way it works. So every time you open up a browser, and you go to a website, you'll see like a digital ad.
right.
For that digital ad to get onto that place, there was an auction basically that takes place. It's
Mm,
called real time bidding, and there's hundreds of thousands of different people trying to buy that ad space, and the second it's loading, this is happening. It happens over like microseconds.
interesting.
Um,
Wow. Okay. Yeah,
yeah,
I had no idea. I mean, I know you pull something up and you know that you're seeing something that is related to what you're interested in, but I had no idea how it was happening in the background. Yeah.
oh, yeah, and that's a great point as well. Is that it's personalized,
Hmm.
so the way it works, so that there's something called a DSP, or demand side platform, and I can go on that and I can run all my campaigns on that, and I can buy what's called inventory. Inventory is just like where that ad will appear, right?
Hmm.
And it could be a video ad, it could be a display ad, which is just a static image that you see, like a banner or something like that. And yeah, so I will go onto my DSP and I will start. I will say, okay, I want to buy display ads at uh, I don't know, $1.75 per CPM, which is per thousand ads served. So every
Hmm.
time I serve a thousand ads, I pay 75 cents. And when I do that, it's automatically bidding with all this inventory, like it's just incomprehensible, the amount of inventory out there and stuff like
Right.
that. What you said was a great point, because you can also personalize it, so you can apply layers of targeting. So I can say, for example, to cover brand safety, I don't want to appear on any naughty sites or anything like
Right.
that,
Yeah.
so I'll say keep
Yeah.
it under 16,
Right.
no gambling, no porn, whatever.
Hmm.
And then I can also put in filters to avoid fraud. So there's a bunch of fraudulence in
Of
this
course.
market, on the open
Yeah.
market. There's like and big companies, all size companies are doing some rather bad things
Hmm.
every now and then. Like, for example, one example would be that they can serve an ad off the page, so you're not even seeing the ad, but technically it's being served, so someone's paying for it.
Ah, interesting. Yeah.
It's a very simple trick, but
Yeah.
you'd be surprised it works sometimes.
Hmm.
So I can apply anyway another filter of for fraud, and then, which is the really interesting stuff, which the marketers really love, is I can say, okay, this person watched this show, this person is interested in this sort of thing, this person is this age, this demo, you name it. And that's where like the marketers really start salivating, because it's
Right.
like that's a really granular level data at scale.
Hmm.
So it's really addictive for marketers. And as I mentioned before, data is getting harder and harder to good data is getting harder and harder to find for various reasons, as we'll get into. Um, so they're like, it's like crack for them. It's like drugs.
Right.
They
Right.
need that at scale granularity.
Hmm.
So it's a challenge at the moment, and we'll get into that later. But that's essentially how it works. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, yeah, that absolutely does make sense, and like I said, it kind of explains some of your experience as a consumer. Now, you said like when you're in a browser, I assume this is basically just any internet connected device. Essentially, is that it?
Yes. So the way it works, so it works in browsers. So obviously pop up ads. Also, that's called in-app advertising, which
Mm-hmm.
is so like app developers can put spaces for advertising within their apps as well.
Right.
But it all works in the same thing. So if I'm on my DSP, I'm saying, okay, I want to target this many, or I want to put this much money towards people on their phones with display ads, this much money for people on their tablets, browser. And then there's another ad format called CTV, which is basically those ads you see on like Netflix and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
sort of a more premium type of inventory, but those are the basic types that people will be buying.
Interesting. Okay, and
Yeah.
that being the case, I'm kind of curious then how that gets into the sort of concerns of your constituents at MAF, right? Like the mobile
Mhm.
providers themselves.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's. I think there's a lot of different ways it can tie into them. For one, they should be using it to promote their services, right? Like
Right. So as just advertisers like any other corporation, right?
exactly. Yeah, because it's really good. Obviously, there's the sort of like analytics you get afterwards about how well your campaign performed and all that good stuff. But I think there's other ways that telcos can sort of utilize essentially. For one, telcos own like so much data. They
Right.
are sitting on like probably one of the most like a gold mine essentially of
Mm-hmm.
data. I mean, they got like location data. They got what people are buying and all this stuff. So I think they need to, and there's sort of a growing awareness of it. I think they've been very slow to sort of monetize this data,
Right.
obviously in a privacy driven way. But for example, so there was a recent joint venture, ad venture, which was founded by Deutsche Telekom, Orange, Telefonica, and Vodafone. It was over here in Europe. They applied for like approval for it, for the EU, and it was approved. And they all get like a 25% stake in this. To be honest, I don't know the full details if they're
Sure.
available of how it will work, but essentially they're going to be monetizing their data for advertising.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I was surprised at how quickly it was approved by the EU
Yeah, yeah.
because
Usually they're pretty strict about that. I mean, we don't have GDPR, and it's
yeah,
we think of ourselves over here as more the Wild West of that sort of thing, right?
exactly. I
Yeah.
mean, what Europe is the leader in like regulation, which is
Right.
either a good thing or a bad thing in
Right.
your mind. But there's a lot of bureaucracy. But I was surprised at how quickly they approved it, and I think it was because there's sort of a growing awareness of the power that these big tech companies have, like Google
Mm-hmm.
and Facebook. And I think regulatory people are very keen to even the playing field a little
So it's
bit.
a balancing of the monopolistic kind of power of who has your data and is storing it. And is it crazy to say that in a sense that like as a consumer with a digital life across all your apps and that's that all those data are going somewhere on a server in a data center and there's a sort of advertising dossier on each of us basically.
I wouldn't. It's not like quite as sinister as that. I guess
Right.
it depends. You have like the Amazon people. They have your Amazon data. The
Right.
Facebook people. They have your Facebook data. So it's more like broken out. And I think that's one point I was trying to make as well as that. It as sort of like the privacy concerns are growing and there's more and more regulation and as the so the mobile the browser cookie. Are you aware of this? Like a third party browser cookie?
Yeah, sure, but go ahead. Definitely explain it a little bit in case anybody wants to be up to speed on what you're saying.
Yeah, so essentially, third browser cookie. Like every time you go on a website, it asks you. Europe anyway, it asks you if
Yeah, we get that for
yeah,
almost
yeah,
all
yeah.
sites.
But
Yeah.
essentially, it's just like a little sort of identifier, as it's called,
Hmm.
and it says this person has been to this site, and advertisers can use that to to
Right.
market to you better, essentially. So it's going away. It was supposed to be gone, I think, like this year, but there was a sort of stay of execution. So I think it's going to be around for another year or two.
Hmm.
Um, so as I said, like marketers are very addicted to that sort of granularity and
Right.
being able to target like the individual. So as that goes away, there's going to be people are going to have to depend more on data, like sort of consented data. So like what
Right.
first party data, as it's called. So
Mhm.
you have a relationship with a company and you consent to letting them use their data. That's
Mhm.
going to be like really really valuable. I mean, it's already really really valuable, but there's less of it than third party data, which is like the cookies and stuff like
Right.
that.
Right.
And but that's going away, so it's going to be even more valuable.
Well, is
Yeah,
there a sense in which that's almost like, more powerful for the advertisers? Because if I intentionally opt into something, I'm much more likely to actually pull the trigger and be a consumer of that, right? So,
exactly. Yeah, yeah. And like, to be honest, I think opting in is good. Like you get better, you
Mhm.
get more personalized ads and stuff like that. I mean, people are a little bit paranoid about it, and I get that. But like, if you actually want to be served personalized products that are actually you're interested in, then you should absolutely consent.
That is the thing about it, right? There is a sense in which, like, yeah, there's something, you don't want to feel like there's this information about you that you're unaware of and have no control over. But there is another side of that coin, which is that very often I have been introduced to products in a particular niche that I was totally on would in the pre-internet world never would have been able to find in a million years, because I wouldn't have happened across them in a store or whatever that I like, right? You know what I
Yeah,
mean? So
exactly. Yeah,
there is some aspect of connecting consumers with things that they actually want and or need, that they wouldn't have had an easy time finding in just a
exactly.
regular brick and mortar
Exactly. I
situation.
think that, but I'm also glad that consumers are getting more control, I
Yeah, of
guess, over.
course. Yeah, yeah. Like I said, you want to you want to feel like you've had some agency in this. Certainly,
Yeah. And actually, just another thing on why telcos should be aware.
Yeah.
I think that telcos should learn a lesson from these big tech companies about personalized advertising, because
Mm,
I've noticed that a lot of the big operators, a lot of big telcos, like they're trying to sell you stuff, and some of the stuff I get they're trying to sell me is just so not relevant to me at all. Like I
right.
get ads from them about like this is like like value add stuff and upsell stuff, right? But
Hmm.
like some of it is like for like diapers. I don't have
Right.
any kids or anything like
Right.
that. You know
Right.
what I mean? So
Yeah.
like they're sitting on so much data. They should be able to deliver really relevant and personalized advertising messages. So I think they need to copy what the big tech are doing, so they can upsell better, cross sell better.
Hmm.
Give you more value added services and all that stuff.
And then again, from the sense of, okay, so you've been in the telecom world for like a year now. I've been in telecom for 17 years, and across those 17 years, one of the main themes has always been this difficulty with the fact that providing wires or towers, right, and antennas, in the case of most of the MEF kind of people, um, is something like a commodity market, right? It is a pipe, right, over which data flows, right? And one of the key challenges of the industry has always been, how do we not be a commodity whose price is always going down because transmission rates are always going up? And it strikes me that this is like another way to move away from the commoditization of telecom services into sort of additional margin, additional ways to make having built out that infrastructure worthwhile. Is that something that sort of is on the minds of your members?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, particularly for the operators, they're trying to diversify their their what their profit more than ever now
Hmm.
with these different ways. And I think they kind of realize that big tech have been using like their 4G and 5G to make a lot of money, and they're kind of starting to want to get a piece of that pie.
Yeah,
So
these are the lamentations I've heard from providers across, not just mobile, of course, but sort of internet, broadband, that sort of thing. Of like, oh,
yeah,
this is the age old fight of you're using my pipes to make all the money, and I just have
exactly.
this infrastructure. So it sounds like this is a good opportunity to even that playing field, as it were,
Yeah,
perhaps.
definitely, definitely. Yeah.
Excellent. So I think that sort of covers the what is in it for the MEF members. But you had mentioned earlier just that it's it's getting harder and harder to do. Is that just for those privacy reasons that you had mentioned, like the OEMs? Apple, for example, I have an iPhone. I'm sure many people listening do, and you can now ask your apps not to track. How
Yeah.
can they get around that? How are you going to sort of solve that problem then?
Yeah, I mean, there's sort of alternative identifiers being developed, more privacy compliant identifiers, more so than like the cookie, which I talked about is going away.
Right.
You mentioned Apple, so they have their own Apple app tracking transparency thing that you have to consent to. So there's different sort of identifiers to get around it. In general, we're seeing a sort of shift away from what's called behavioral advertising, which is this person bought this product, so I'm going to serve them this ad. Since we don't really know that anymore, there's a shift towards contextual advertising, which is okay. I want to sell a certain, I don't know, a flower. Let's say
Right.
I want to sell a flower, so I'm going to put my ads on websites where people who are interested in flowers are likely to go on. So it's sort of like taking it backwards, right? It's like, you know, they're going to go there, but the only problem with that is, as I said, that it's harder to do the sort of post analysis of it because you know what I mean. But it's a different sort of approach, basically. Yeah, and I think go ahead.
So is this a case where the capabilities of the AI are really what comes into play in a sense, right? So if we're pulling away from a little bit of a lack of data, then it's how well the sort of software can make decisions about what to do, essentially.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. So it's funny that you mentioned AI. So one thing as well that you can do is, so if you have less data, you can try to build AI models based on that little sample. So you could it's called lookalike modeling, and essentially you could get like a very small sample of some actual identifiers, some data, and you can use AI to build out a sort of lookalike model. So people who might be interested in the same thing. So you can definitely use AI to um, kind of grow what you have to work if you're working with a limited amount of data. Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Well, Ross, like I said, this is a topic well beyond me. So let me just give the floor to you to say, is there anything else that you think important to touch here that I might have missed?
Yeah, I mean, so as I said, I think one thing that we could talk about is ad fraud.
Right.
It's a huge topic. There's a lot of it going on. It's some of the, it's not just the smaller players, but the bigger players. So a lot of the inventory out there on the sort of open market is crap, essentially.
Right.
And when I say the open market, so the way it works with programmatic advertising is you can buy I can buy advertising space that anyone can buy, and that's just like there's billions and billions of those sort of inventory. And then we have what's called private market inventory, which is like it's someone who's selling space on their ad, but they're doing it privately only to certain people. So that's just to differentiate from that. So a lot of the stuff on the open market is really, really bad. As I said, you can apply sort of filtering, like anti-fraud filtering, onto your campaigns to make it to make them have less fraud, essentially. And also you can analyze the results of your campaign as well to see if there was any fraud. But anyway, it's still a huge issue. It's just growing in issue, and there's various kinds of fraud as well. Obviously, not just like ad fraud, but like phishing, like stuff that attacks the user as well, and stuff like that. And I think AI is sort of a driving force behind a lot of it, because you can make really convincing fake ads and stuff like that. So that's a huge issue. So at MEF, one of the things we're doing is we have a sort of content and advertising working group, as I mentioned. So essentially, we meet once a month, and we discuss things that are going on in the advertising world. We've got some good members. We got a lot of like MVAS players, a lot of ad guys. So we got like Telecoming, Golden Goose, Sam Media, and stuff like that. But one of the things that we're working on is a content and advertising fraud framework document. And essentially, we just break. It's sort of a Bible that we're working on that breaks down all the different kinds of ad fraud that are out there. So that's ongoing. So I guess there's definitely a role for MEF when it comes to fraud, or not just MEF, but organizations similar to MEF,
Yeah.
like the sort of education side of things. I think that's one of the important aspects of preventing fraud. But yeah, what do you think? Is your head spinning right now? Are you kind of getting it, or?
Yeah, no, I think so. Well, that's always right. When I go back and listen, will something click? But yeah, for sure. And I think you bring up a really interesting point there, which is something that is not unique to telecom, but is particularly pronounced in telecom. I think is that because the whole internet, whether it's the mobile side of things or the wireline side of things, or come all of it together, is a network of networks. It's a whole bunch of private entities working with each other that, I've seen so many reasons in this industry for folks to have to get into a room with their vendors, their competitors, the whole sort of like ecosystem to talk about how to work all of these things out. And truthfully, this is one area that I never even would have thought of. I'm used to thinking about, we need to talk about how to get our network automation to talk to each other and things like that. But I think this is really fascinating to deal with these kinds of like advertising fraud and figure out ways that that you can exchange information and strategy or whatever to deal with it. Does MEF make like specific recommendations, or is it more just like facilitate everyone getting together and work out kind of like best practices kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we don't, technically we're neutral.
Right.
We shouldn't really have a stance. We're member led, which means that our members kind of make a decision. So we would all come together as a group and make recommendations. We would all agree on something, and then we would put that out as our recommendation.
So
it's
like a best practices or policy document, something like that.
So specifically for the telco side, we have like the SMS fraud framework, which is very similar to the content and advertising fraud framework, which I was talking about. That's already on its third version, so check that out. That's a good. A lot of people kind of use that as their fraud bible for just identifying different kinds of fraud. That doesn't really make specific recommendations. It more just lays out these are the types of fraud,
all the issues out there, right?
Yes, but then we have what's called the Trust and Enterprise messaging badge, which you can apply for if you're a MEF member. And essentially, what that is, it's just like it's sort of like basically saying like a sort of badge that you can put on your site and say, I'm not participating in any sort of fraudulent messaging, stuff like that. And the way it's enforced, so a number of people have signed it already. And the way it's kind of enforced, it's actually the members themselves who enforce that. Right. So if you're on that list and you see another messaging company that's not doing good things, then you can actually call that person out. Right. And no one has ever been removed from the thing before. But it would look really bad if they were removed from that.
Right.
That's the kind of stuff that we do. It's all very democratic, member led. It's not me or Dario saying we have to do this, we have to do that. So, but of course there is, as you say, the sort of facilitation of the discussion, which is an important part of it.
Yeah, and that sort of like it's better for all of us if this is working well, so we can publicly shame you if you're not with us, right? Yeah.
Well, what do you think are like the big fraud problems facing like the sort of telco world today? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, that's a great question. So from a network security issue, I think a lot of that's a little bit different of a concept, I think, from fraud, which is where I'm mostly focused, is just on sort of network security. But I imagine it's a lot of the same thing, which is that, right? They are constantly working, and the skills one needs in-house at any business, right, are difficult to come by to stay up with whatever the new methodology is. So I think that's the biggest issue, security fraud wise, is just that that it's hard to find folks who are skilled at the newest techniques or aware of what's going on. And so we're seeing a big shift on the network space to having to kind of go to managed services providers and sort of more centralized economies of scale of dealing with that. I wonder if it's the same there, where the sort of advertising fraudsters are constantly innovating in a way that's hard to keep up with.
Oh yeah, 100%. And not just, I mean, in all fraud types. I mean, some of the smartest guys in the world.
That is the great tragedy of it, isn't it?
Yeah. And we just have to be, and there's sort of a whack-a-mole element to it as well. You know what I mean? Like if you get one type of fraud, then another one will pop up.
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. That it's like, it's not just about the techniques themselves. It's about how to apply whatever security and anti-fraud techniques you have to whatever it is that they're sort of coming up with at the moment. And that just takes someone being like aware of that community, being on. But there's very few people out there that do that. So I think that ends up being a really big struggle for most companies on how to get to those people and use that knowledge that they lack in-house, you know?
Yeah, and from the messaging side, because as I said, like a lot of our members are messaging players. Artificial inflation of traffic is the big one that always gets talked about a lot. Are you do you guys do much SMS stuff, or
we don't? But yeah, so I imagine this is not totally unrelated to maybe something like DDoS, where you just are using bots to make lots of traffic. Is that basically it?
It's sort of like fake traffic, where you you basically demand more and more like one-time passwords and stuff like that.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So they have to buy a bunch of SMS from you, and then there's called smishing, which is where you basically you have like a receipt that says, oh, we delivered this many SMSs, and some of them you actually didn't deliver at all.
Right.
So combined, those two things are very deadly, as you can imagine. Like it's sort of like taking both sides. So that's a big one that gets talked about a lot from the messaging side. But yeah, there's a bunch in digital. I think digital advertising is probably in a worse state of fraud right now than the telco side of things. I think telco, there's always stuff going on. There's always going to be stuff going on, but they're starting to, or you know, I think it's a more mature market. You know,
right? That makes sense. Yeah, it's had longer times to think about these and identify the threat actors and their methods and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, programmatic is quite new, and I think that's why it's such an interesting area for me personally, is because there's always just we could have this podcast again in a month's time, and
right.
So many things could have changed. So it's very exciting for that reason. But
I mean, that cues me up for my last kind of question that I had in mind here, which was so I think we got a good picture of like where this came from, how it's changed with some of these privacy rule changes and maybe the end of cookies and that sort of thing. What does it look like a few months, a few years from now? What is going to be new and interesting? I think both. I'm kind of interested in this case from the consumer standpoint as well as for the mobile providers. You know.
Yeah, definitely. So I mean, I guess as you know, like from the content side of things. So as a consumer, short form content is getting more and more popular, as you probably know. So the likes of TikTok, and then what's called like ephemeral content, so like stories, stuff that disappears.
Right.
So I think we're going to see more ads specifically targeting, sort of working within those confines.
Right.
And then I think we're going to see more elaborate kind of ad formats. So I mentioned display and video, which are your basic ones, but I think there's sort of a growing desire from the marketers for like a more premium form of inventory. So
that makes sense.
I mentioned sort of CTV, which is it's called connected TV, but it's basically what you see on Netflix and stuff like that. So it's pretty much just on your smart TV, and that's really, really expensive at the moment. So like depending on who you're buying for, it can be like $30 to $35 CPM. So like you serve 1,000 ads and you pay like $35, which is absolutely huge for programmatic advertising. As I said, the CPM for display is like on average, depends, but 0.75 cents.
Wow, so exponential difference there. Yeah.
The reason it's so high is because a lot of advertisers really want it, like especially like entertainment advertisers who have like the new TV show that's coming out, and also there's just that the inventory is just not there yet. It's still relatively new, so there's not enough to go around, basically. So you probably saw that Netflix are really pushing ads, so I think they're getting rid of their cheapest tier where you pay the cheapest amount, and they're replacing it with like an ad supported tier and stuff like that. And essentially they're making a lot of money from ads right now. Like they've had a huge profit. So the CPM for like some of the Netflix ads, it was going for like $60 CPM at one point, which is just absolutely absurd. So I think we're definitely going to see more of that. Just I think hopefully it will be more normal and less of like kind of a really expensive luxury, but there's definitely like a growing desire, I think, for other ad formats. And as well as that, so like there's other types of ad formats, like sort of interactive ones and stuff like that. I think we're going to see like more sort of gamification in advertising. Like, so I used to work with we worked with this company called Undertone, and they're like they have inventory. They have like premium ad inventory, and it was like really cool stuff. So like stuff that like goes all over like it's on your screen, like covers the whole screen, and stuff where it's like interactive and stuff like that. And so as I said, they're a private market, not open market. They're only selling to specific people. But I think we're going to be seeing more of that just every day. And besides that, we talked about lack of first-party data. People are going to try and come up with ways to get around that. We're going to see obviously more regulatory action against Facebooks and stuff like that, against where they make their money, basically, which is from advertising. And I think as well, but just kind of bringing back to the telco thing, with the outrolling of 5G, I think 5G will sort of help that sort of premium ad inventory get out there. You know what I mean? If you have better connections, you can show higher quality video, you can show more interesting ads and stuff like that.
Especially two-way traffic, I would think. It seems like, correct me if I'm wrong here, but the ultimate goal of advertising in that sense would to have you not fully realize you're being advertised to, in a sense, right? You know what I mean? So, and if that requires like, sort of two-way traffic, 5G can be much better for that. You know what I mean? So,
exactly.
Yeah.
Like, as you said, like making you not realizing you're being advertised to, like, I think mobile app developers can sort of keep programmatic advertising in consideration when they're actually developing the apps, and come up with more creative ways to serve those ads to you than just your bog standard, and make it a little bit like, maybe, obviously they have like stuff like reward videos where, like if you get something done in an app, then they'll just play an ad or something like that. So I think you'll see more creative uses from the actual beginning of the inception of a mobile app, so you have to have kind of a more holistic view.
Right. So weaving this into the app design, the software itself, I mean, this is really fascinating. It's, again, both as kind of like an analyst of the industry and as just someone who gets advertised to, right? So,
yeah, exactly.
Excellent. Yeah, well, this was really interesting for me. Thanks very much for doing this. I think
it makes sense to everyone watching, I hope.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, on that note, if it doesn't, is there a way they can sort of keep up with you and find you at MEF?
Absolutely. So Ross at mobileecosystemforum.com is my email. Reach out, or just reach out on our website, mobileecosystemforum.com. Obviously, reach out if you're interested in membership. If you like the sound of any of the event, stuff that we're doing. We have an event coming up in January 10th in Sam Media's office. Kindly. So that's going to be focused very heavily on content and advertising. That's going to be in Kuala Lumpur, but we'll have other stuff, throughout the year. So let me know if you're interested in that. We'd love to have people come along. And I was going to say something else, but I forget. So it's probably fine. Hopefully, it's not important.
Well, if you think of it, tell me. I'll put it in the show notes. So.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. But yeah, no, it was really great talking to you. I mean, I think in general, it doesn't hurt to have a more holistic view of everything, and you can definitely. It was an interesting challenge for me to kind of like think of why programmatic advertising is relevant to telcos, but there is a bunch of reasons.
Yeah, no, exactly. I thought this topic was fascinating just from the very introduction of it, of thinking about, again, we always think about the network itself, but the network is only there to serve the companies and the users that need the network to connect them, right? So this is, I think, a key way that that is happening. So that's what makes the network necessary, right? So
Exactly.
I think it's a fascinating view into that. So Ross, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, cheers.